Think you know history? Think again. Napoleon wasn't actually short, and Vikings? They never wore horned helmets. Most of what you believe about the past is completely wrong. Today, we're exposing 20 of the biggest historical myths that still fool people. Let's start with a classic, Napoleon Bonaparte. Everyone pictures Napoleon as a tiny, furious little general. But that couldn't be further from the truth. He was actually about 5 feet 7 inches tall, which was average for a Frenchman at the time. In fact, the idea that he was short was probably just British propaganda. They were masters of a good smear campaign, weren't they? Next up, those iconic horned helmets you always see on Vikings. You see them in movies, comics, and even on sports team logos. The truth: there's zero archaeological evidence that Vikings ever wore horned helmets into battle. Can you even imagine how impractical that would be in battle? Believe it or not, the idea of horned helmets comes from a 19th century opera costume. So if anyone's at fault here, it's Wagner, not the Vikings. And while we're on the topic of historical fashion, let's talk about chastity belts. These medieval devices were supposedly used to ensure a woman's faithfulness. However, modern historians say that most of these belts were just a fantasy created in the Victorian era. Even the so-called authentic examples. Historians have debunked most of them as fakes or misunderstandings. Medieval life was already tough enough, and these devices totally unnecessary. How about this famous line? Let them eat cake. Did Marie Antoinette really say that when she heard her people had no bread? Nope. The phrase actually appeared in writings years before she became queen, and it was originally attributed to other aristocrats. Marie Antoinette ended up as the perfect scapegoat for the fury of the French Revolution. Now, let's talk about the notorious Salem witch trials. Most people picture hundreds burned at the stake. The truth? Nobody was burned, though the events were still tragic. 19 people were hanged, and several others died in jail. Now, let's talk about pirates. Did they really make people walk the plank? Not really. This myth was popularized by novels such as Treasure Island, not by real pirate practices. Real pirates had much quicker, and frankly more brutal, ways of dealing with their enemies. The plank? Too theatrical to be real. And treasure maps marked with a big X. That's mostly fiction too, also largely a work of fiction. Most pirates spent their loot as fast as they got it. Moving to the ancient world, did Roman gladiators always fight to the death? It makes for great movie drama, but it wasn't the norm. Gladiators were valuable investments. They were trained athletes. And it was more like modern-day MMA. Most battles didn't end in death. They stopped when a fighter was too hurt to go on or chose to surrender. A fight to the death was a rare and special event. Here's a fun fact about America's founding fathers. Did you know George Washington didn't have wooden teeth? It's a story we all learn in school. Washington's false teeth. They were actually a combination of human and animal teeth, plus ivory, set in a lead base. Gross. Sure wouldn't. Absolutely not. And what about Albert Einstein? We've all heard he failed math in school. A comforting thought for anyone struggling with algebra, right? The truth is, Einstein was actually brilliant at math from a young age. Sorry to burst that bubble, but it's completely false. He was a math prodigy from a very young age. He had mastered differential and integral calculus before he was 15. This false idea came from someone misreading the grading system at one of Einstein's schools. Let's sail with Christopher Columbus. He discovered America, right? Well, millions of indigenous people were already living there. And Vikings like Leif Erikson had reached North America about 500 years before Columbus even set sail. While Columbus's journeys opened lasting connections between Europe and the Americas. He certainly wasn't the first European to arrive. Another common belief is that people in the Middle Ages thought the world was flat. This is one of the most persistent myths. In reality, educated people since ancient Greece knew the Earth was a sphere. The idea that everyone thought the Earth was flat was mostly made up by 19th century writers to make the medieval period seem more backward. Remember the famous story of Sir Isaac Newton and the apple? The story goes that an apple fell on his head, and boom, the theory of gravity was born. It's a great story, but it's a bit of an exaggeration. Newton himself said he was inspired by seeing an apple fall from a tree, which made him wonder why objects always fall straight down. It didn't hit him on the head, and it certainly wasn't an instant eureka moment. And what about the Great Wall of China? Can you really see it from space with the naked eye? This myth, astronauts keep busting it. The wall is simply too narrow to be seen from space without aid. You can see things like airports and highways, but the Great Wall, impressive as it is, just blends into the landscape from that distance. Here's one from the Wild West: the quick draw duel at high noon. Sure, it's the classic Western movie moment, but historical records show these showdowns hardly ever happened. Most gunfights were messy, chaotic ambushes. The romanticized duel was just that, a Hollywood invention. Did Van Gogh cut off his entire ear? We all know the story of the troubled artist. In reality, he only cut off a small part of his earlobe, not the entire ear. It was still a dramatic act of self-harm during a mental health crisis, but the story has been exaggerated over time. What about the Trojan horse? Was the city of Troy really conquered by a giant wooden horse filled with Greek soldiers? While the Trojan War really happened, there's no solid archaeological evidence for the horse itself. Some historians think the story is symbolic, perhaps representing a siege engine or even an earthquake that toppled the walls. Now, back to ancient Rome. Did Nero actually play the fiddle as Rome went up in flames? First, the fiddle hadn't been invented yet. He might have played a lyre instead. Second, historical records suggest he was actually at his villa 35 miles away when the fire began. He rushed back to the city to organize relief efforts. The story was probably spread by his political enemies to make him look bad. Here's another one. Walt Disney drew Mickey Mouse, while Walt was the voice and the visionary genius behind Mickey. The iconic character was actually first drawn and designed by his lead animator, UB Iwerks. Disney was a brilliant ideas man and producer, but Iwerks was the artist who brought Mickey to life on paper. Did ninjas wear all black outfits? That iconic black outfit, largely a creation of movies and cartoons. Real ninjas were spies and assassins, experts in stealth and subterfuge. They often wore disguises to blend in, dressing as farmers, monks, or merchants. That classic black suit. It would have been pretty conspicuous, especially after dark. And for our final myth, Lady Godiva's naked horseback ride. Legend has it, Lady Godiva rode naked through Coventry to protest a tax her husband levied. It's a fantastic tale of defiance, but nearly all historians agree it never happened. The story first appeared in writing about 200 years after she lived, and it likely grew from an older pagan legend. So, how many of these did you believe? History is so much more complex and fascinating than the simple stories we're often told. If we've challenged some of your long-held beliefs today, that's a good thing. It means we're all learning. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through historical myths, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Let me know in the comments which myth surprised you the most. See you in the next video.